This week, we welcome Justin Hazard, Principal Security Architect at AutoRABIT, to discuss Salesforce security risks. In the Leadership and Communications segment, boards have a digital duty of care. The CISO's greatest risk, department leaders quitting, the 15 habits of highly empathetic people, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. This podcast is supported by AutoRABIT. You trust Salesforce to power your business, but even the best systems have blind spots. Hidden risks like over-permissioned users, untested code, and missing backups can quietly slip through the cracks. AutoRABIT closes those gaps. Their DevSecOps platform brings automation, governance, and security together so you can build fast and stay protected. Because speed means nothing if you can't trust what you deliver. Visit securityweekly.com/AutoRABIT to learn more.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 425, recorded December 8th, 2025. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Yes, my Buckeyes lost, but if I'm going to pick a loss to have, that's probably the one to have. Right, Mr.
Right.
Albuquerque?
Oh, agreed. I think Ohio's going to go all the way, man, in the playoffs. There's no doubt.
Yeah, that game.
No, it was disappointing though.
Yeah.
I was rooting for your boys, man.
Missed field goal, missed fourth down.
Just shows you how important special teams is. You know?
It is.
I mean, it's so important. But yeah, Texas Tech took a win though, right, over the weekend.
Yeah,
They
so
did.
they
Yeah,
blew
no doubt.
BYU out again,
Big
twice
time.
this year. Yeah,
Big time. Yep. My Pats had a bye, so hey, we got a little rest. But Summer Steelers took a game over the Ravens, so
Yeah.
that was pretty big. It was some pretty good football, pretty good NFL over the weekend.
some big games, right? You know,
Yeah.
the Green Bay game against the Bears, that was a great game. You had Houston win and KC
Right.
last night. I think that means KC's probably out now.
I think they're out.
I think they're out.
They're not going to make the playoffs, which is
No, because the
crazy.
Broncos are winning the division right now. They're
Right.
11-2. Like, holy
Right.
cow. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
That the Bills game was tight, and man, they had some snow up there in upstate New York, man. Woo, I'm glad it wasn't here in New England.
Yeah.
Then we got the Eagles tonight. Eagles Chargers tonight.
Yep.
Oh, the Zach Ertz injury. Oh my God, did you see that?
No.
Oh, his leg got bent out of shape in a way that it shouldn't have. I mean, it could be career ending. It was bad.
Yeah.
It was really bad.
Oh.
So,
No, I only
I'll
caught a
take the
few of the games after Saturday nights. I kind of stayed away from the TV.
a little depressed.
Let's just say they call us fanatics for a reason.
Yeah.
It's a crossover between a fan and a lunatic. Yeah, that was me
Yep.
Saturday night. Anyways, this segment is sponsored by AutoRABIT. Visit securityweekly.com/AutoRABIT to learn more. Justin Hazard is the Principal Security Architect at AutoRABIT, blending years in DevSecOps and SOC operations to secure Salesforce environments. As host of From Code to the Cloud, he brings frontline experience to life, turning complex security challenges into scalable, real-world solutions for digital ecosystems. Justin, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I was rooting for Indiana. I think Indiana is going to take it all this year. And my Notre Dame did not make the CFP, which is we could have a long conversation on that.
Oh, yeah.
So,
There's lots of long conversations about that already, Justin. And
for sure.
I grew up in Ohio, not far from the Indiana line, because I grew up outside of Toledo. So I rooted for Ohio State first, Notre Dame second. There is no way the Hoosiers will beat the Buckeyes again. The only way they win is somebody's got to take the Buckeyes out. I'm just telling you now, because it can't happen. It won't happen twice. It'll be like Oregon last year when we just stomped them. Okay, so
Fair. We'll see how it plays out over the next couple of weeks.
yes, we will. We're going to talk about Salesforce, though, not football, even though football's somewhat more fun some days. But it's interesting. Last week we did a session about SaaS-based applications, and Salesforce was mentioned a little bit in that. And this week we're digging into Salesforce. And this one's kind of near and dear to my heart, because as we do our kind of annual tabletops, this last year it was Google, the year before it was Salesforce, right? And I don't think people realize some of the potential issues of your Salesforce environment where you have a lot of sensitive data. So let's start kind of more on the, the Salesforce exposure side first.
Yeah, so I think the real interesting about Salesforce, outside of most other SaaS applications, is, and this is not on Salesforce in any way, shape, or form, but it's how sneakily the sensitivity of the data went up and up and up, right? So we started way back in the day when Salesforce started up of like, hey, I'm going to put my leads in there, and then I'm going to put my, my wins and everything else like that with customers during the sales pipeline. But like anything in IT and like anything in these industries, if something can do something, and we can make it a little bit cheaper, we're going to shove additional data in there. And that's effectively what's happened with Salesforce over the last, decade or so. So we're seeing it as a CRM, but we're also seeing that CRM morphed into like patient data and patient records. We're seeing it being used by credit card processors, and that credit card data being maintained in there. And then also legal contracts, which that one kind of surprised me a little bit. But then when I stepped back and looked at it, I was like, that makes a ton of sense. Okay. So the fact of the matter is now we're starting to see all of these different risky data sources starting to live all within one ecosystem, which makes it really juicy. And we saw in August with SalesLoft and Drift that we're now starting to see attack groups that are saying, that's where the data is that I want. That's where I can start to leverage and start to do the things that I need to do from an attacker perspective to get to those data sources. And that SalesLoft Drift, compromise was really interesting in a number of different ways. One was we saw 3 attack groups that had never worked together, now working together to achieve a similar goal. That, from my understanding and from everything that I've looked at, all of the data that I've looked at, that's unprecedented, it's a huge thing, which means that Salesforce is likely going to be a bigger target moving forward, because we are starting to see, and we are seeing corporations use Salesforce for their entirety of their data set. So, yeah, it was sneaky, but we're here. We need to start looking at it a little bit differently than what we did previously.
Yeah, and it's the evolution of a lot of these products that started out as cloud-based point business applications, right? They've evolved into engines that run the entirety of your business. Highly customizable, interconnected throughout the business, plugins that attach to the line of business applications, so that way you can be more effective and more productive. It's the evolution of a lot of these, like Salesforce, the ServiceNows of the world. They become business engines now, these ecosystems of business engines. Now, what some people don't do during their risk assessment or evaluation is they look at these things called shared responsibility matrix, or a model that these SaaS applications have, right? And I know very mature SaaS applications or ecosystems like this go all the way down to regulated type responsibility matrix. Like I know Salesforce has a PCI centric responsibility matrix. They have the overall shared responsibility matrix. So talk to me a little bit about maybe some of the misunderstandings that you see when folks are walking into the world of a Salesforce and they don't understand what they're actually responsible for.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to like an AWS, a GCP, or an Azure, right? Like, so when we're thinking about, I've been using this term, what's old is new again. When we're thinking about data centers in 2010 that we all owned, we had to make sure that the people that were going in there, we knew who was going in there, why they were going in there, how long they were going to be in there. All of that has shifted to AWS, GCP, Azure, right? The same type of situation aligns with what Salesforce is having to deal with. And I've been aligning this and kind of using this idea of like a bottle, like a Coke bottle, right? The bottle itself is what Salesforce owns, but what's inside of it, that data and how it's accessed, is owned by the customer. So you can't penetrate that bottle technically, right? Like we could break it potentially, but it's not an easy thing to do. And Salesforce has done a great job of securing that infrastructure. But when we start to put the low code and the no code type applications on top of it, and the permissions and the groups and whatnot in the profiles to allow access to those particular things, let's leave the apps aside for a second. That starts to introduce risk. That starts to introduce a way of, hey, how do I make it so that this group of people that needs to review legal contracts, we took away their share, we're putting it into Salesforce. How do they access it? Well, this group is available. This profile is available that has the permissions that I need, and I'm going to go ahead and use that. Well, we've seen this before in the AD world, right? Where now we've got this thing that's being over permissioned, and we've got Jason is sitting there with all of these permissions that he needed to do his particular job. And now he's got access to all the legal contracts as well. That's a big problem. So I use the term "what's old is new again" is because we did see this in the Active Directory days, and it's starting to kind of rear its ugly head again, which is it's not an unachievable mountain to get over, right? Like we've done it once before. It's just now a vernacular problem. The problem that we didn't have in the AD worlds is we didn't have connected apps that would connect into our shares and into those permission sets, right? Now we have connected apps, which means I have some way for some outside entity to access my environment and view specific portions of my data that we didn't have in shares, right? In Windows shares back in the day. So now we've got to look at those and what do they have permissions to? And now are we over permissioning because we took this group and this profile and we assigned it to something else and giving it all of the things that it needs. Least privilege is the most important thing that we need to be looking at this point in time. So it's not crazy like we've seen this before, but there's a layer of complexity there as well.
Yeah, and we don't own the core code base per se, right? Because it's a SaaS-based application. I've done some work in this space. There are some data elements available as a set of APIs coming out of Salesforce, but there's also a lot of things you need to physically go check. So we've actually built some capabilities to log in and go find those setting screens, because how else do you audit this at scale, right? Like if it's not in the APIs and I can't pull this out into a system, how do you automate some of these checks? Because I think a lot of it starts with permissions, right? Who has admin access? Who has different permission levels? What's the permission levels of these third-party apps that you've linked in? So Justin, let's start talking a little bit about how do we start to solve for this? And what should we be doing to get a better handle on our Salesforce configurations?
Yeah, so the part of the problem is again, it's what's old is new again, right? So when we wanted to look at somebody that got assigned an admin permission, we'd have to go to look at the event logs and tear through terabytes and terabytes of data, which is not fun for anybody that has actually done it. So that's one way that you can do it. It's hard. And then on top of it, like you don't necessarily have the longevity of those logs to be able to see, okay, well, this permission was assigned in 2006 and has been resident for, the last almost 20 years. So one of the things that, and I'm not trying to do a product pitch, one of the things that we at AutoRABIT saw this being a problem is, hey, this is not an easy thing to do. So how do we do that? And that's where the instantiation of Guard came from, is we're looking at, hey, how do we pull this in and how do we look at this and how do we make it into a very like attack graph type style of, hey, these admin permissions are assigned to all of these people. Why are they assigned to all of these people when you should only have 3, maybe 4 in the entire organization? And it allows you to kind of see where the OAuth tokens permissions are and what data they have access to and what fields they have access to, right? Because being able to have access to an entirety of a record is one thing. Having access to very particular fields like username and address or something along those lines versus an actual credit card number or an actual SSN there's levels of severity here when it comes to the data. So being able to put a tool like that on top of it and kind of see who has access to what, how they would access it, and where that access is originating from is going to be the biggest thing. You can do it through the event monitoring and the event logs that Salesforce puts together and ships, but they are not easy to go through, unfortunately, because they're so verbose. It's great logging, but it's not easy when you're trying to take something on like this and go back, right? So those are two different approaches that you can take. I haven't really seen much in between, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I'm curious. So you've got some data in the event logs. Where do you get the other data from? Do you have to manually go get this data, or is it available in some of the Salesforce APIs, right? Because it's marrying that data together, right? Biggest problem in cybersecurity, not data. Context, right? So this is a context problem, right? In my opinion, is how do you validate existing user permissions with these events to really understand is something misaligned, right? And so are both of those pieces of context easily available from the Salesforce APIs and event engines, or do you have to kind of piece it together yourself?
The short answer is no. It's not always available in the API because you have the ability to create a custom field. So if I created a custom field for every password that was created in my particular application, I'm the only one that really knows what that custom field is for. So Salesforce doesn't even know. Salesforce doesn't have that context. I created it. So now I've got to go talk to the developers and say, we're looking for fields that have this level of data and this level of granularity. Is there anything in your application that does it? That calls into another portion of the problem that we're looking at is, how do I do that when that developer moved and went on to another role? The person that initially created it. So let's imagine, because we've seen it before, we have our senior developer and his team moved on to another organization for another opportunity. So we backfill those people and they're starting to learn the code base. We're 3 to 6 months into them learning that. They don't know everything about that particular application. They don't know everything about that code base. So that's one of the situations that we're trying to figure out as well, of how do we get to that portion of, even with custom fields, I can say, you're likely looking at sensitive data, and this is probably the bucket that it resides in.
So along with permissions, always up there with the biggest threat vectors in an organization is misconfiguration, right? And we're living in a world today where we're evangelizing the citizen developer with low code, no code environments, right? We're putting folks who weren't developers in the shoes of a developer to go configure a major line of business application. That presents risk, right? And I mean, it's a CISO. Whenever I hear low code, no code citizen developer, it becomes that cringe moment from the CISO's perspective. How do you get control over that? How do you get control over visibility into what they're doing and monitoring those configuration changes, making sure they're not exposing the organization, right? Because again, we're pushing folks who aren't natively developers to do configurations and quote unquote low code, no code development in a major line of business application.
Yeah, in all honesty, like, this is something that I've kind of been preaching at the top of the pulpit as much as I possibly could, is that it needs to be pulled into enterprise risk, right? Like, what I've been seeing for the most part, and I'm not going to say that this is the rule, but it's general, right? Is when you're doing change management in Salesforce, that is happening at the Salesforce team. It is not happening in an enterprise risk environment. So if we think about it in terms of like, hey, we want to put new permissions in place in AD in 2015, right? That would go to an enterprise risk board and they would discuss it, and it would say, okay, what do you have access to? What risk does it open up? A bunch of different questions are answered. And then from there, what ends up happening is a decision, go, no go, is made, right? Or hey, let's do it this third way, right? That is not happening for the most part, again, in Salesforce. So when they're developing these applications, they're saying, oh yeah, I can use this policy or this profile, or I can use this policy in order to continue building out my application and giving those particular things. And then from there, what's happening is it's going internal to the Salesforce team and saying, hey, we're going to make this change so that, hey, is production down? That's the main concern that we have at this point in time. Yeah. It needs to get pulled into enterprise risk. Enterprise risk needs to have an understanding and understand that vernacular in Salesforce. And then that go, no go decision needs to be made, because you're enhancing the visibility and the risk posture and visibility of that risk posture to more people, which makes it so that there's a different view and a different lens that's being applied to it. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest, if not the only thing that I would evangelize right now, like bring it into enterprise risk as quick as you possibly can.
Because it's not just a breach of data, it's potentially shutting down a portion of your business or a big portion of your business, right? And so when we think about business resiliency and all the focus on being resilient, how can you not have Salesforce as part of your overall enterprise risk posture, right?
100%. Yeah. The resiliency component of it, like it's just like an e-com business where that website goes down, like there's big problems there. If you don't think that there's going to be cascading effects if your Salesforce instance goes down, I would like to have a debate with you.
Yeah. So question on the coding side of this, right, is, I get the base configuration, but all this customization, does that normally go through a traditional CI/CD? Should we be looking at some of our development security tools? There's a bunch of them, right? Is that how this code, is this code being reviewed that way? Should be that code being reviewed that way,
and
right?
Managed, like what's the GitHub for low code, no code?
Right.
So the short answer is yes and no. And this is what I'll say. So yes, there are CI/CD processes in place. And there are, hey, we're going to do these commits and it's going to go through a review and it's going to do a code scan and all of the fun things that happens. This is where it gets a little interesting. The low code, no code, surprise, surprise, is proprietary to Salesforce. Mm-hmm. So most of your code scanners out there today, again, I'm not trying to do any plugs here. You're kind of setting me up, which is awesome, but at the same time, not expected. Most of the code scanners out there, think your Sneaks of the world, your SemGrep, those types of things, they're more for your larger languages, Go, Python, Java, so on and so forth. Very small people are looking at the actual proprietary code base of Salesforce. They may have a few rules that'll look for it, but it's very generic and it's very generalized what they're looking for. We do have a tool called CodeScan that is specifically written for the languages, the proprietary languages of Salesforce and the low code, no code environment. So what we're seeing people do is they set up a CI/CD. CodeScan is a component of it, and then once CodeScan goes through the break/build process, we'll push it or we'll break it, and it goes back to redevelop. So the other really non-surprising thing here is this should probably honestly live in some form of AppSec, ProductSec type of environment as well, and lead into that. So I think that's where the other big miss is. So you bring it into enterprise risk, I think naturally AppSec, ProdSec comes into play because it's following a very standard DevOps lifecycle that AppSec, ProdSec is already a part of today. So it's just built on top of an application, which is not typical for AppSec, ProdSec, but it very much, like every time I look at this, it's like, yeah, all of my buddies that do AppSec today, this is exactly what they do on a day in, a day out basis. So
yeah, but just not for Salesforce. That's why I asked these questions, right? I'm really interested in this because I run a big portion of my business on Salesforce, and like I want people to understand that like your traditional tools here may not help you because it's proprietary code of Salesforce. There's not really any products that scan for it. How do I address these potential security flaws, right? Like that's why I'm asking these questions, because I think they're very important for others who use Salesforce to run a major portion of their business to understand the potential risks and where can they go to look for solutions.
Yeah. To be fair, again, not trying to do product pitches here. We have solutions for pretty much all of those things, right? So
Yeah.
the CI/CD portion, we have a tool called ARM that helps you manage those jobs, that flows into CodeScan, that does the vulnerability scanning of those proprietary languages. And then from like the permissions and the profiles type situation, we've got Guard. So those tools do exist. They're very niche, as expected. So that's where we kind of built our entire business on. Our founders found that 15 years ago that this was going to be a problem, and they started building for that. So I think it was a bit visionary at the time, and I think it's. I wish people had been paying a little bit closer attention to Salesforce even 5 years ago, because I don't know if we would necessarily see the problems that we're seeing today. But not all is all, I don't want everybody to lose their mind and go start screaming at Salesforce developers or Salesforce teams. We can get there. We can work through this, and we can get to a well-defined oiled machine.
Yeah, I mean, we're figuring out some blind spots, right? With these cloud applications that we're using to run our business. I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier and touched on it a little bit. The whole resilience side of the aisle, right?
Yeah.
Is it a risk or a threat vector? We know it is with ransomware organizations to hit your backups. What about your Salesforce backups? Are those exposed? How do you secure those? I mean, that may not be a product pitch for you, but your subject matter expertise. How are folks handling the security of the backups of the data that they're backing up from Salesforce?
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting anecdotes of my time at AutoRABIT specifically, one of the customers we were talking to, what we kind of uncovered was they had pretty much the same data set in a data loader type situation in their AWS. And that was super protected, highly protected. They knew everything about it. But as soon as it got into Salesforce, it went to a completely different realm of like non-existence. So I would imagine that a lot of people are doing something similar with S3 buckets and things of that nature as like a pre-staging before they load the data into Salesforce so that they can clean it up. So if that data is in AWS and it's being super protected and it's your key risk, let's also look at Salesforce because it's also going to be a key risk.
Yeah, exactly right. Like that was our scenario 2 years ago. Well, it was a little over a year ago now, but we lost all the data out of Salesforce. Where do you start? Like, right? And it was funny because as we were going through the exercise, the question was like, okay, so who's our Salesforce account rep? Like, we don't even know who to call at Salesforce. Like, I mean, just basic stuff, right? It's like,
right.
Anyways.
Yeah. And I mean, all of these things map into like your vendor risk management or your third party risk management framework as well, right? Like, I smile because it keeps me from crying. But the fact of the matter is like, had we been doing that as a part of VRM and TPRM, we would have known what those answers are. So again, like it's the same conversation of bring security in early so we don't have to worry about this later stage. And now we're in the later stage. So now we're going to be worrying about it. And we'll make those adjustments and get those things corrected. But it's getting started is the biggest challenge that I see right now.
It's getting security involved, right? Because the finance is probably the first group that brought it in. Then it got expanded to other groups, and security doesn't know the potential risk profile of your Salesforce environment. So just get security involved, and then we can figure out how to protect it and make it more resilient so it doesn't crater our business.
Yeah, I mean, we're on a security podcast, so I'm preaching to the choir here, but like we're used to figuring out how a technology works in the vernacular so that we can talk to the people directly, right? So this isn't a new thing for us. It happens every couple of years where there's this new wild thing out and we've got to figure out how we're going to secure it. So it's not something that, we're adept. And we adapt to these types of situations on a regular basis. Salesforce is just the next one.
And Justin, to your point, though, you have to start somewhere, and no action is an action. And that's not what we want to be seeing, right? Is no action. We
100%.
as security leaders may have to bulldoze our way into the room to start this conversation. And I think that's a key point is we understand there's a risk. We see that there's a risk. We got to own it and maybe walk our way into that room and start acknowledging it and educating on it and bulldozing our way into that room to have the right conversation so we can start somewhere.
Yeah, and I've given a couple of talks at specific Salesforce security events, right? Where mainly your admins and your devs are in the room and it's not security people. So we're coming from this approach as well of like, hey, I want to talk to y'all and say, hey, this is how I view it. Like from my personal perspective of being in the security industry 15, 20 years at this point, this is how I view it. And these are the things that I need to know. You can help me identify those things and move this thing faster. As long as we work together as a team, I don't see a major problem with this. And the good thing is there are a lot of Salesforce people out there in the dev and administrative worlds that are going, you know what? I didn't think about that particular thing. Let me go talk to my security team. Yeah. How do I broach them? What language do I use? And, there's a couple of like key points that I'm like, hey, if you say X, Y, or Z, it's going to pique everybody's interest very quickly. And that's exactly what you want. It's going to be scary at first, but I promise you, like security people aren't going to bite. They're going to ask a lot of questions and they're really going to start to understand what's going on and understand where that risk is and be able to give you that picture of where your risk posture actually sits. So there are a lot of people on the Salesforce side that want to work with security folks, and they may have been insulated over the last couple of years, but now they're starting to go, I'm going to go find this person and I'm going to go find that person. So they're wanting to, they're willing to. So let's get together and let's start teaming up on these things.
Awesome. Justin, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you for having me.
If you want to secure your Salesforce environment, please visit securityweekly.com/AutoRABIT to learn more.
Ransomware, supply chain attacks, 0 days. Cyber threats don't wait, and neither should your business. With ThreatLocker, you're not just reacting to threats, you're stopping them before they start. Our Zero Trust endpoint protection locks down your environment with pinpoint control over what's allowed to run and what's not. No guesswork, no blind spots. Just proactive, built-for-now security that keeps your business moving. Want to see how a true default deny strategy works? Head over to securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker and take the first step towards shutting the door on threats before they even knock. AI gives attackers superpowers, and your employees are the soft target. Flip the script with Fable Security, the modern human risk platform. Fable's powerful risk engine connects the dots on human vulnerabilities, like password hygiene, phishing risk, and data sharing and generative AI, and deploys hyper-targeted snackable AI nudges and briefings, just in time, right where your people work. The result? Hard outcomes. 13x faster behavior change, 60 to 90% risk reduction. Make Fable part of your cybersecurity story. Visit securityweekly.com/Fable. Now, if that wasn't scary enough, let's get into this week's articles, Jason.
Let's do it. No, that was a great session. It was good to be able to identify some blind spots that organizations have in their major business applications. So
yeah,
love it.
Yeah. First article. So when I pulled this article originally, I loved the title. Yeah. Boards have a digital duty of care. Where this goes is not where I wanted it to go, but
it was
some
interesting
of the pieces,
though, because it wasn't a normal article, right? And it just shows how pervasive security and cyber risk is, because it starts off with these, what would you call them? Shared interest communities like townhouses, HOAs,
right?
Those type of things.
Property management kind of
property
companies,
management, that kind of stuff. And how they're collecting data and they're collecting information about their communities and the people in the community and what a risk it is from a fiduciary perspective, from a cyber risk perspective, regulatory side of the aisle. And it's a vertical that you normally don't think about, but those boards, because you have a board that manages these HOAs and these communities, they have a level of liability and they have a level of fiduciary responsibility, right? Because they're managing HOA funds and fees. I mean, it's a risk factor I never really thought about because it's a vertical I never really thought about. But wow, right. If you belong to an HOA, there's a risk there.
Yeah, but it mirrors other industries.
Exactly.
Like, remember healthcare? Yep. Everything was physical paper prior to HIPAA, right? And the electronic records and all this stuff. And so very similar to healthcare. They move from paper files into electronic files, and they have some of the same risks and some of the same potential exposures. Maybe not health data, but financial data and other data elements. So it was interesting to see how it's paralleled other industries and how they're, really talking about the responsibilities of that
100%.
care, which every company that has this kind of data should have a digital duty.
Agreed 100%. And to be honest with you, they probably deal with a lot more challenges than your typical business would. Because here's the thing. You have residents who are living within a community and they're paying monthly HOA fees. And there's going to be a challenge of cost versus risk. Do they want their HOA fees to go up because we have cybersecurity concerns with the data that we're housing in the system that manages our HOA? Like, that's a conversation, and there's voting involved, and you can get the residents of the HOAs involved to vote. There's a whole set of challenges that I'm sure they're facing on the day-to-day that a normal business probably doesn't have to deal with.
Right. And think about all the members. Remember, we've been talking about personal liability and some of these things, right?
Yep.
I wouldn't want to be sitting on a HOA or POA board with personal liability associated to all the residents' personal data getting exposed.
Exactly.
Like that would just, And how many people think about that?
Not many. To be honest with you, I never thought of it until I read this article.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, no, to be honest with you, it was a good article. I liked it. I'm glad you added it.
Yeah, I kept it. I added it and then I read it and I was like, we'll cover it anyways. The title's right.
It's good. It's good. I liked it.
Yes, it's applicable. Very applicable. So is this next article, right? So Gartner, how CIOs can craft business-driven cybersecurity narratives. Well, obviously, if it applies to the CIO, it can apply to the CISO or the CSO, right? Or any executive at the end of the day.
And I mean, this mirrors conversations we have all the time, right? It's getting out of the technical conversation, moving into the business-centric conversation, speaking about drivers and growth and competitive advantage instead of cost-centered tactical conversations with leaders and boards around the organization. This supports everything that we talk about on the show, right? Where we're saying, become that strategist, have that strategic conversation when you're talking about risk and cybersecurity in the organization, and really position your team and yourself as a business enabler.
What I would have liked to have seen in this article is some more direction on what those metrics are. I still think this is a big gap that the executives have, CIOs, CISOs, et cetera, is what are the right metrics? He gives categories of metrics, but what are some of the right metrics that we should be rolling up and reporting back to the executives and the board, right? I've done some work in this space. We had a Say Easy, Do Hard segment on this around OKRs earlier this year. But when I see these articles, I'd like some more examples because I think that's still a big gap for everybody.
And the leaders can leave with and go execute on, right?
Yeah.
And just give a little bit of meat that they can go execute against. 100% agree. It's take it to that next level deep where you can give folks, recommendations on how to move forward.
Yeah, exactly. Any guidance, even if they're basic, like it gives us a starting point to build more robust metrics. I was actually in strategy sessions in New York on Friday with one of our big partners, and we were talking about the strategy alignment and risk alignment. And this is an area I see kind of emerging from kind of the big consulting firms, right? Where how do you align your risk posture to your strategic business objectives, right? And there's work being done in that space, but we're not mature enough there yet. I think we'll see continued gains on this over the next few years, but this is what I think needs to happen.
It has to. It's again, it's one of those say easy, do hard things. There's things that you can talk about and quantify, business impact, what an outage would do to the business, things of that nature. But then there's also the things like brand and reputation hit. You got to do some work to figure that out. It's not easy to do.
It's not easy to do. Like I've looked at the different risk models that do it. FAIR tries to look at secondary risks, but it's not easy. Right. And how many people know what their secondary impact exposures are? Like what's my regulatory or operational? It's not an exact science. So are there guardrails or guides that you can use to say, okay, well, if if we have loss of life, right? Think about this from an employee safety perspective, right? Can you put a range of potential costs on that so you can understand what loss of life from a secondary impact looks like in a safety concern versus a regulatory versus et cetera? And I still think there's a lot of work to do there in the industry to get us, like I said, more mature.
Yep.
All right. So this next article ties into this, the CISO's paradox, enabling innovation while managing risks.
It's the dichotomy of the CISO and everything that we're talking about now, right? It's you want to be that business enabler, but at the same time, you have to be the gatekeeper of risk, right? So it's a difficult science and probably semi, having that nuance of negotiation and political negotiation and those type of things to be able to work the culture, because you don't want to be the department to know, but you have to influence.
Right.
So you have to use your political prowess and negotiation prowess to negotiate.
Yeah, and this ties in a little bit to the previous interview segment,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Around Salesforce. Salesforce, major tool to run my business. Security's not involved. So how am I supposed to set risk tolerance and guardrails around Salesforce when I'm not even involved in what's going on in Salesforce development side, right? So this is what puts security CISOs in a really interesting position, is how can I help the business, yet I don't know what's going on from a risk management perspective.
And I kind of hinted it to, in the last segment. It's our job to go in there and push that door open and peek in and say, hey, can I be part of this conversation? You have to start building, you have to start integrating yourself into the business. Yeah. No action is still an action. And CISOs don't sit there watching everything go by. If you're a security leader, go integrate yourself into the business. They're not used to working with you if you're not integrated into the business. So make yourself known. Build relationships. Start talking about, like what Justin said, I'm here to help. I'm here to move things forward. Help me help you, right? And start having those conversations around risk. And eventually you'll get into that, into that place where you have a great relationship and you're brought in up front because they're going to realize the value that you bring to their organization.
Yeah. I mean, this article has a lot of the components. This is a pretty big article, I think, by the way. Yep. It's got a lot of the components we touched on in that first interview, is make this a risk management problem, right? Because I can't set risk tolerances and risk appetites without understanding the potential risk profile. Then it talks about build secure by design into fast developer life cycles, like your Salesforce environment or any development environment. And Salesforce has some uniqueness to it, as we just learned, but we've got other tools and systems out there. And so as you read through this article, just kind of equate some of this back to the previous conversation for Salesforce, but apply this to any of your primary business applications.
Yep, exactly.
Every AI workflow in your enterprise touches sensitive data. Customer names, email addresses, financial records. One wrong move and you're facing a compliance nightmare. Enter Area, the enterprise AI orchestration and security platform built to protect what matters most. With Area, you don't have to compromise between speed and innovation or security and governance. Quickly deploy AI without cutting corners on compliance. Give your teams the confidence to adapt AI with Area. Stop gambling with your most sensitive information. Visit securityweekly.com/area to see it in action. That's securityweekly.com/AIRIA.
Modern attacks don't just hit devices, they target your users to gain access to Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace. And when those platforms go down, it's not just email, it's your entire business. That's why there's Kaseya 365 User, one unified platform that protects your users and SaaS applications. Phishing, credential leaks, insider risks, it stops them all. Learn more and schedule a demo at securityweekly.com/K365.
All right. Driving success, strong leadership in IT and cybersecurity teams.
I called this article a listicle because it was a whole... I don't know. It smells of AI. I didn't do any type of analysis on it, but again,
it actually has an actual author, Keith Brodigan, but did he use AI to develop this article? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, no, and it's a good article, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about this right now. You have to have a strong leader in that seat to be able to drive the cybersecurity strategy forward. right? And it gives you some good ideas on how to build trust and support the relationship building and really have that relationship with your team. But you can take some of these and actually use them outside of your team as well to build relationships and influence. So yeah, it's a good list. I mean, it's about 11 different items in there with a quick, 3 to 4 sentence description of each. And, it covers things like good communication reduces risk, right? Strong leaders encourage learning, ethical leaders protect the organization. So there's a bunch of good nuggets in there.
Good nuggets. I think people have to read it for themselves and kind of extract out what of those elements are most important to their leadership teams and use that, because it was a pretty long list.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, this one. Yeah. So the CISO's greatest risk, department leaders quitting, very possible.
I mean, you'd be out there saying it's the greatest risk. It's one of the big risks. There's no doubt about it. I wouldn't call it the greatest risk. I mean, that just lends you to under prioritizing all the other things that are big risks within your organization. But yes, having your middle managers and director level, leaders within your organization leave, that's a big risk. You're losing institutional knowledge. You may have strategic momentum with projects that are going on, and it starts, I take the whole military standpoint, right? All my lieutenants are gone at that point. If you lose those managers, now your lieutenants are gone and that institutional knowledge goes with them. So it's an important thing to focus on.
It is. And it ties into the next article, right? Because how do I protect, my employees? How do I'm going to use this term, but it's not retain, it's develop. How do I develop?
How do I develop?
How do I develop? They use the retention word in this article, and we've talked about this multiple times.
God,
people don't want to be retained.
It rang in my ears. Like whenever we talk about this, and you say it, how leaders don't retain, we develop. It just rang in my ears as I'm reading this article. I love it.
Exactly. Right. You got to develop, right? You got to create paths forward. You have to. You got to give your employees opportunities at all different levels, from the bottom all the way up to your leadership level. And one way to do that is making them happy, right? So this Harvard Business Review, why making your employees happier pays off. It pays off in lots of ways. One, they don't want to leave. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're a board of directors or you're a CEO or a CFO, read the bullet point that says companies that scored 20% on several key employee happiness measurements outperformed in stock price, right, by 6 percentage points. So there's quantification there from a financial perspective that your biggest asset, your employees, when they're happy, they do the great work. They make your clients happy, right? They're out there working for you, and guess what happens? You grow. You grow because of it. So, anybody out there who wants to, judge it from a financial benefit perspective, the data's there. It's 11 years worth of data.
Yeah. Data's here. And even tips and guidance on how to work through some of this, how to engage your employees, how to get them involved in the process. How can they participate and become happier? It's in this article, right? And I think it's really important, because we don't think about, again, it's not a retention thing. It's a development thing. This is one of the development areas, right?
Right.
And how do we develop a happier, more productive, culture in our companies? It's not easy anywhere.
No, and it's not always a salary conversation. So many organizations want to throw money to retain employees. They throw money at them because that's all they're trying to do is retain them instead of develop them. It's more than that. They're not leaving just because of the salary. There could be a salary, ceiling that they've hit in their role already. But if they have managers who are open to input, if they have good communication within their team and with their managers, if they have supportive leadership where they're supporting them through the good times, the bad times, all of the above, and then there's that connection, that human connection, it's going to be great, right? Then you're going to have happy employees who are engaged.
Yeah. I love this one tip in here. This is a great tip for leaders. Schedule a team lunch and don't go to it.
Yep.
I thought that was so clever. Like,
Absolutely.
get your team together, but then you as a leader don't go. Let them all go meet each other, talk to each other
Openly.
openly without you there in the room. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. Like, I never thought about that, right? Like, you schedule a team lunch and you usually go. Here, they're like, no, don't go. Just let your team go.
Right.
Pay the bill, though.
Yeah, of course.
Pay the bill. Make sure the bill's paid. Don't leave it to one of your employees to pay the bill. Like, don't go that cray. But
Right.
I just thought it was interesting. You know, you have a team lunch and then you don't actually go to it. All right, last article for this week. The 15 Habits of Highly Empathetic People. The Empathy Guide from Vanessa Van Edwards, Science of People. Every once in a while, she produces a really, really good article on the leadership communication side, and I got to pull it in. Again, her articles can be a little long, but there's a lot in this article if you want to understand how to be an empathetic leader.
100%. Yeah, there's a ton of great golden nuggets in here. Take the time and read it. Honestly, I recommend you do that. You know, it's beneficial from being able, like we talked about it earlier, connect with your employees, get that compassion there when you're interacting with them, and it's not just a transactional relationship, right? And it's having that level of core skill as a leader where you can bring vulnerability to the table on both sides. Have an open door for them to be vulnerable with you, and the same thing back, right? I mean, we're all human. We have to have that connection. We have to have that relationship with our employees.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, these last 3 articles kind of tie into a very similar theme. I need to continue to develop my team, make them happy, understand as an empathetic leader what they need, how they need it, etc. These all tie together because it is part of that development path that if we want to keep our teams together, if we want to continue to succeed as an organization, these are some of the skill sets you need, which is why 100%. I try to link some of the stuff together in these articles for us to learn from.
Yeah, one of the things I will say, though, is and I don't think it really covered it, and correct me if I'm wrong, make sure it's authentic. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to take this list and not be authentic with it, because your employees and your colleagues are going to see right through it because they know it's not you. Use them as tools that embed into your own personality and the way that you manage and the way that you lead. Because the last thing you want is to be looked at as someone who's either trying to manipulate or is inauthentic or something like that. I mean, I looked at some of these skills and I'm like, wow, those are skills of a great leader. But you want to know what? They're also skills of a good social engineer.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
You know what I mean? So it's like, you don't want to be authentic. That's the key. Take all of this information that we give you and embed it into your own authenticity and your own style.
It's funny. I did my monthly awareness training this morning, actually, before the show. and it was about fake remote employees.
Yeah.
So here's the tip, everybody. Have them wave the hand in front of the face. If the face gets disrupted, you know it's an AI-driven image. Right. If it doesn't, like I just did, it's real. So
in the interview, say, hey, you have something on your eyebrow. Can you wipe it away?
Right. Exactly. Jason, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.